Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, right before we started recording, I asked if you had seen the Tate Martel video, and you said, "What Tate Martel video?" And then both of our days immediately improved because you got to watch it, and I got to watch you watch it. And of all the ways to start your day, that is right at the top of the list.
Yeah, it's like when I had already seen all of Breaking Bad, and then my wife decided to watch it, and I could watch it with her as she's going through it the first time. So that's, you know, aside from the weird marriage analogy, that's exactly what you just got to witness as I watched the video of Tate Martel, who, let's just start out the show with him. It all ties in because we're really talking about the Ohio State roster and the transfer portal and how much room they have left on the roster for 2021 guys and things like that. And Tate Martel is now in the portal. And this video time, if people haven't seen it, it is a lot of Tate Martel being very introspective. I would say humbled, but I don't know if you do this kind of video if you are truly humbled, because it's a lot of just him working out, lifting weights, talking about how he's always been a hard worker. And but Tom, there's something missing in this video, and Tate Martell has long been questioned since he left Ohio State, and even when he was at Ohio State, questioned as a passer. Tom, in this video, what is something that is missing, in your opinion, from this message that Tate Martell has put forward?
One thing would be introspection. Two things would be good PR advice. But the third thing would be any clips of him throwing a football. There was a lot of, there were multiple shots of him thrusting his pelvis in the weight room. There were, push-ups and rowing machines, and a lot of him shirtless. I'm sure the Tate Martell shirtless SEO will, drive a lot of clicks, so that's good. But yeah, there was more JT Barrett and Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow on field passing clips than there were Tate Martell, which was, there were a lot of choices that went into this, and that was one of them.
I'm kind of expecting him to go back home somewhere. He's from Las Vegas, and maybe he heads back west. But as you're talking, Tom, we got Brett Bielema back in the Big Ten, which is something that I've been wanting for a long time. What if Tate Martell comes back to the Big Ten? And I'm not saying it has to be with Illinois, just anywhere. Wouldn't that be nice? Because we only got to cover him for a little bit. And it would be nice to be able to continue to cover him, even tangentially, at another team. Although, Tom, it just came into my head. What if he went to Michigan?
That would be maybe the funniest possible result there. I have to say, I think the thought process that led him to Miami seems very much to me like it's going to lead him to UNLV. That seems extremely likely. Like that, unless you're doing a 180 from the thought process that led you to Miami, like you're not ending up in Champaign, Illinois, or Ann Arbor, Michigan, or I feel like outdoor pool proximity is probably a larger factor in this decision than you might ideally have it be.
There is a stadium in East Lansing that right outside the stadium, there are outdoor pools, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
And Michigan State, you can look right outside their stadium from the press box and you see pools right there. So maybe Sparty.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I think usable 12 months a year outdoor pool proximity is probably the thing that I didn't lay out there. It just felt like a very odd choice for someone who the one of the knocks on him for a long time has been it's a little bit self-centered, and it's a little bit internally focused rather than team focused. And then, to do a video where you're the only person in the video and you're on camera virtually the whole time, and you're talking mostly about yourself and how you're such a great teammate, it was like, I don't know if that's the message everyone's going to take from this. That if the knock is you seem to enjoy attention a little too much, maybe an more under the radar kind of like, rather than a look at me mini film, very slickly produced. I mean, it was done by someone who knows what they're doing in the film world. So it was probably not an extremely cheap or, that took a while to shoot. That took probably hours and hours to shoot a 2-minute video. And it was probably not cheap. And yeah, that's, I mean, when the knock on you is you're maybe a little self-centered, a little too internally focused, a little too, a little too worried about the PR and the shine on you, that's probably not the way to disabuse people of those notions. Let's put it that way.
The video is 2 minutes and 20 seconds, which is the limit for Twitter. I wonder, like, is there a director's cut or a Martel cut that is on YouTube? And exactly, like, if he had his druthers and there was no Twitter limit, like, how long do you think? Is this a 7-minute video? Is it 12 minutes? Where would you cap this? 90 minutes, Tom?
Does the Springfield Short Film Festival have any kind of restrictions? I mean, I assume you're not getting a Cannes. I don't know if they're doing Sundance this year, but like, I'm sure the Springfield Short Film Festival will be.
I don't know that's you can't beat football in the grind though.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that Tate's film did have a disturbing lack of football in the groin. So, but it was just, and it was black and white. It was like Barney Gumpel's film. It was it was like real artsy. Like, what? Yeah, I don't get the sense that the people who are around him, who are, suggesting these things are people who have a great sense for what it is probably going to take. Like, he just has to show up somewhere and be okay with just being a guy. And I don't think he's ever been okay with just being a guy. He, at Ohio State, talked about, I mean, every time we talked to him, he talked about he didn't come to Ohio State to sit on the bench. And then he went to Miami with the intent of winning that starting quarterback job, was very quickly not winning that starting quarterback job, moved to wide receiver. Did he have one catch in his Miami career, I think? Then sat out this year. I mean, there's just a lot going on there. And it feels like he's not getting great advice right now. And, you hope he ends up somewhere good and is willing, able to really kind of change the trajectory of his career. Because it would be, that would be a nice story if he ends up, coming together and having a nice year or two wherever he ends up. But yeah, I don't even know where he is eligibility wise at this point, because he was a 2017 for Ohio State. So he played 2 years at Ohio State. And then he played a year at Miami. So I guess he would have 1 year of eligibility left. So, it would be a wonderful, cool story if he just goes somewhere and, has a nice final chapter of his college career. But I watched that and I was like, I don't think this is setting up for a good final chapter of his college career.
Yeah, you wonder. He mentioned he's made some mistakes in his playing time, in his playing days, and that was about 3 seconds of the 2 minutes and 20 seconds of the video. You wonder, can he humble himself to go to Nevada or UNLV, or is that a place where he can be the big fish in a small pond, and he sees that as people will know me there. It'll be interesting to see what he does. I still think if he has any future in the pros, it's as a slot receiver, and he had an opportunity to maybe grow into that, and maybe that didn't go very well for him either at Miami. I don't think anything did, but I mean, who is really expecting? You don't go to Miami to get better at football. You go to Miami to go to Miami, and because we were there, we did not get any better at football.
Speak for yourself.
Sorry.
Speak for yourself. Yeah, I mean, if you go back and listen, it's like, I'm going to say the same things about him. I'm saying the same things about him now than I did when he transferred to Miami, which is, if you're trying to show people you're serious about football and this is more than just the flash and the glitz and the glamour, Miami is like literally the last place you should be transferring. Like, he looked at West Virginia. I remember that was one of his other, potential transfer destinations. And it's like, going to West Virginia and going to Miami tell me two very different things about your priorities. I think he would have been better off had he gone to West Virginia. I mean, it almost couldn't have been worse off than it turned out at Miami. So yeah, I don't want this to come off like we're mocking him. I still hope things work out for him, it would be, like I said, a fantastic final chapter of his career. It doesn't feel like watching that. I just kind of went, okay, well, this is just going to kind of go the same way in whatever new zip code he's in.
You have learned nothing. And really, the pool proximity thing, from my experience in West Virginia, every cabin porch has a hot tub.
Mm-hmm.
And that's year round. Whenever you want it, there's a hot tub there for you. So that's something to think about. But yeah, it would have been completely, oh, you're going to West Virginia, then yes, you are serious about football. You're going to Miami. Do you even practice? Are you even going to practice?
And the other downside is if you have the kind of Tudor's Biscuit World proximity that you would have in Morgantown, your shirtless videos 2 years later probably don't look quite as good. But, I mean, again, we got to prioritize what we're prioritizing here. So,
yeah. So I do not expect him to end up back at Ohio State, even though, Tom, there is room for him. I know Ryan Day has said that they have about one open spot. Really, from crunching the numbers, they have I have them at, if you take away the 4 seniors who opted to return and don't count against the number, I have them at 84. However, you can make that 83 by counting Jalen Harris into that number because he would have been a senior this year. He didn't play, but you can still count him as a senior. And now he's no longer part of that number. So that takes him down to 83. But then, Tom, then you go to the other fourth-year players, redshirt juniors, Jerome Cage, and Elijah Gardner. You don't necessarily ask for the redshirt until it's needed, like the 5th year. And that's my understanding is that is when you apply for it and you get it. So technically, those two could be counted as 4th-year seniors in 2020 and not be added to. You give them that extra free year from the NCAA, and those don't count against your scholarship numbers. And now you're down to 81, Tom. Does this sound off to you? Does my thinking about Cage and Gardner freeing up some spots by using it that way, am I wrong there? Is that off? Or is it rather brilliant?
I don't
Those
know
are your
that
two options.
I don't like any of my choices there. I do think there is a lot more flexibility with the numbers this year than there is in a typical year. And so you can kind of fudge numbers where, like, technically, yes, right now they probably are at about 84, which would reflect what Ryan Day said. There's a whole bunch of yeah buts there. Like, yeah, but you can sort of move some stuff around because of this one-time exception that the NCAA granted about guys getting an extra year. Yeah, but you're going to have guys who transfer after spring ball, because you do after every single spring ball. You get, what we always refer to as the spring awakening, where you're a 3rd-year player and all of a sudden you're repping behind a bunch of guys who came in a year or 2 after you. And it's like, oh, okay, so I'm just not going to see the field here. And we're not going to go into names. Obviously, that happens every year. I mean, it's that there are just no programs that have 0 transfers in and out after spring ball. That just every program has it. And there are programs where the numbers force them to have it. And so then the coaches have the conversation that you're never going to play here. And then there's places where guys are not dumb. They can figure it out. If this is your 3rd year and you're repping with the 3rd team and you're behind a bunch of guys who came in after you, like that, there's a pretty clear message there. So yeah, I don't think the numbers, they're nowhere near the point where the numbers would be even remotely a concern to me. If you're at 92 right now, then, we'd have to really fudge some things to get down to 85. You need guys to transfer out. Ohio State, if they're at or below the 85, and from every indication we have right now, they are, there's no real reason to think that there's, a real tight restriction. And, if they add another couple guys for 2021, you add a guy or 2 in the transfer portal, you're going to have a couple guys transfer out. You can, and if literally no one transferred out in an unprecedented event, you can still probably monkey with the numbers in the way that you were talking about to make it all, to make everyone sort of fit in this, this 1-year exception the NCAA has granted people.
Yeah, I know people are concerned about the numbers. There's no reason. I don't think there's any reason to be concerned this year. I could give you a list of 7 to 10 guys who could transfer after spring, and I don't think, or before spring, and I don't think anybody would be shocked about it. And no, we don't ever really get into names unless Joe Burrow tells us he's going to transfer, or if he's thinking about transferring, then yes, we are going to talk about it. But I mean, this is one of those things that we've said in the past. You can kind of do on your own. You can kind of figure it out. There's a formula there. If you're heading into your 4th year and you haven't played necessarily, or you're in your 3rd year and you just got passed by a freshman and you're or 2, then yes, those are the kinds of guys that usually end up taking off, or at least a percentage of them do. You mentioned adding a couple of guys, so let's, in terms of the 2021 signees, because that has now changed. Talk about JT Tuimoloau, who was waiting to visit, and it didn't look like maybe visits weren't going to open up. And if visits didn't open up, then the likelihood of him becoming a Buckeye, say next week, were higher than if there were visits being opened up. And now with Pete Thamel reporting that the quiet period is going to start around the middle of April, which would allow unofficial and official visits, I think that has thrown everything for a little bit of a loop with JT Tuimoloau. And I heard Alex on the morning scoop with you, and I would agree that this is something that I don't extend. And Brandon Huffman from I believe 24/7 reported today that Tuimoloau is definitely not going to be signing anywhere in February so that he can take those visits. I don't think it doesn't end things for Ohio State. I think it would be better if he wasn't visiting. I think Ohio State would be feeling better if he wasn't visiting, or there were no visits, because they were in the driver's seat. And when you're in the driver's seat, you don't want anything changing. You just keep going. But now there's a little bit of loss of control here. Now it may just, he gets to Ohio State. Yes, he's convinced that's where he wants to be. So it does alter things. I don't know if it's significant, but it's a significant thing. Like, I don't know that it changes things a whole bunch, but it is a significant change in just what was going to be happening.
Yeah, it is not great news for Ohio State. The best possible news for Ohio State is he signs with Ohio State next Wednesday. And if this was being extended indefinitely, if the NCAA said, okay, we're going to extend the dead period until August 1st, then there's a decent possibility he just signs with Ohio State next Wednesday. As soon as this came out, as soon as I saw the first tweet from Pete Thamel, the first thing I did was I texted Alex and said, can you come on the morning show and talk about this? And because it was like, oh man, this is a really big deal. And I mean, Alex went into a great deal of detail on exactly why this is such a big deal, not just for Ohio State, but also just for players across the country. Like, this is thousands and thousands of players probably did not get the opportunities that they should have last year because of this. You had guys missing camps. You had guys who weren't able to make visits. A lot of times coaches won't offer a guy unless they've seen him in person. So you either had to bend those rules, or you had guys just like missing out on opportunities. Now you have some of those opportunities starting to potentially come back in April. So that was the first thought. The second thought was, I bet this means JT Tuimoloau is not going to sign on signing day. And this was something that we had a lot of our insiders have been talking about for quite a while, that this was a real possibility, because he's never been to Ohio State before. And you do have guys who, I mean, Denzel Burke this year committed to Ohio State, signed with Ohio State, and enrolled at Ohio State without ever having stepped foot on campus before. And there have been guys in the past who've done that as well. This year, I think it probably is happening a lot more in a lot more places, just because, when you're 11 months out from the time you're going to enroll, you're not necessarily assuming, okay, this is my last possible opportunity to make visits, because there's about to be a global pandemic. So all the guys who would have taken official visits and unofficial visits last spring, last summer, last fall, none of them got to do it. So they have, this is not fantastic news for Ohio State, but it also, this is also an opportunity for Ohio State to make a good first impression on him, whenever he does visit. And, you would still rather be in the driver's seat than not in the driver's seat, as you said. You would rather be the leader, because someone else has to really blow him away. And he's seen a lot of the other schools, like Washington's a possibility, Oregon's a possibility. He's seen some of these other schools already. So this is Ohio State's chance to make a first impression and still win him over. I think Ohio State is still in the driver's seat you're never super comfortable going against Nick Saban in recruiting, but Larry Johnson has a decent track record with defensive linemen. So, I think you still have to like Ohio State's chances there.
Now, you guys talked about the idea of having him or whomever in for official visits for the spring game. I don't think that's a draw. I don't think that's something the coaches would really even concern themselves with, because I don't think there are going to be any fans there. So there's no point. There's no atmosphere that you can create. In fact, you can only create a picture of, this is kind of boring. And the other thing with the spring ball this year, there's no spring break. So you could conceivably end spring a week and a half earlier or a week earlier instead of, because I think if this is a normal year, the spring game would be April 17th, which is when the weekend of the first official visits and unofficial visits starting. So you could actually close spring out the week before and then just focus on the recruiting after that when they're in, and you don't have to worry about, I've got this stupid fan practice that I need to take care of, when in reality, like it's the practice, the Saturday scrimmage before the spring game, that is the biggest one. But I think, unless something changes with the fans, and we're going to let 50% in, I don't see that happening in what 2.5, 3 months here. I think the coaches would rather have spring done, because then you can just focus on the 2021 guys, and I'm sure there are going to be some 2022 guys coming in as well, because hey, let's try to get this out of the way. But I think they would be better served just recruiting at that point and not having to worry about the spring game, and because you've got to give your full attention, because now you're battling with Alabama for JT Tuimoloau, and so I think they would want to give that their full attention.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a possibility. I think Alex's assumption was that everyone is going to try and schedule their spring games for April 17th, April 24th, right after this thing starts, so that you get the opportunity to get guys on campus and have kind of semi-recruiting weekends, even if it's not quite what they would normally be. There's a lot of factors that go into this. How many people are they going to be allowed to have at the Ohio State spring game?
None, and you might have 25,000 at Alabama.
Right, you might, and that's entirely possible. And they might let them have 10,000 people at Ohio Stadium. That's a possibility. It kind of depends. There's a million variables here, and vaccine rates and infection rates, and when are people comfortable with things and all of that. And is that a Columbus Department of Health decision? Is that a Big Ten decision? I don't know.
Tell me, Tom.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have asked a great question, and the way it works is I ask the great questions and you give the answers, right? So yeah, but yeah, no, and there is no answer to a lot of this stuff. And I think the safest assumption is that there are no fans, but do they want to have guys really be able to see? Do they want to, you get to see the system, you get to see the guy who's playing your position the year ahead of you, or 2 years ahead of you, or 3 years ahead of you, meet all these guys while you're having, see what a game day is like, or, at least the pregame preparations and that kind of stuff. So yeah, maybe, and I think they can make it pretty clear that, yes, we don't have any fans here. During a normal year, we would have 100,000 fans here. That's
I don't believe you.
Yeah, that's something they can lay out for people. So yeah, and the other thing is, one of Alex's points was, people are going to want to get these in as quickly as possible, because you don't know, is this all going to shut down again in June? I think people are going to be going into this with something of a scarcity mindset, and as fast as I can use these up, the better, because I don't know. There's no guarantee as far as this fall, in terms of official visits. You can always go back and make it unofficial later, but you get your 30 or whatever it is official visits for Ohio State. Ohio State might be using a bunch of them relatively early to just try and get guys in the class, make sure people have seen the campus, met the coaches, all that kind of stuff. Because as we have learned, nothing is guaranteed.
No, and it will be interesting. Dabo has the no spring official visits rule. I don't know that he ended up breaking it last year. He couldn't this year. And if this is the only, because I mean, do you assume that by the fall there will be vaccines and things, everything will be opened back up, and then you can also bring in these official visits? You're going to have to assume if you don't bring in anybody in the spring that official visits are going to be open in the fall. I do wonder if the NCAA will say something like, we would prefer that your spring camp be done. That way there's no, you're bringing in people from off campus to on campus, that they wouldn't have this interaction with current players that could lead to more spread. So maybe there's a gap that they want there, or will want, or a curtain just to like keep them away. But while you bring guys in for official visits, they are hosted by existing players. They talk to current players, and you wonder what happens with that. And I guess it's a terrible thing to say. Like, is it okay to spread when there's no practice going on? And it's not okay to spread, but like, when that increased risk, is it easier to accept when there's no practice and players are kind of to themselves or just to their position groups? And these are all questions that are going to have to be answered. And I don't know that there are any good answers, because with every decision, you have somebody like, well, this isn't safe. And when in college, and I don't want to get into the whole age range of which is, it's better to have COVID or what, but the lack of hospitalizations in the college age and with the athletes, you wonder if they are now, is this an acceptable risk for them, for the NCAA? But then again, the minute you say acceptable risk, people are like, how dare you? But again, sports is also an acceptable risk.
Right. There is no clean, easy solution that makes everyone happy here. Like, if we've learned anything over the last 10 months or so, there is no clean, easy solution that makes everyone happy. And no matter what you do, someone is going to be telling you you're an idiot for doing it the way you're doing it. So that is just kind of how it is right now. And, I think people are, I get the sense that, if anything, and you can attribute this to people just kind of being tired of it, or people just being a little bit more accepting of the risk for whatever reason, whether it's because they've judged the risk to be less, or just they're just tired of being, locked down. I think the acceptance of risk has gotten greater over the last few months. It feels like with a lot of people, that people are a little more willing to do some things than they were before. You're starting to see indoor dining open up in cities where it hasn't been open. And, there's no shortage of people who will tell you why that is. And they don't all agree on twitter.com. But, I think that people are a little bit more willing to accept some kind of risk, and maybe feeling like certain things that they thought were more risky before are not necessarily, sitting outside in a stadium, with 15,000 people. I don't know that they've traced, there were 15,000 people at the national championship game. I don't know that there's been any sort of significant COVID outbreak traced to that, or to the semifinal game in Jerry World. So maybe now people are deciding that maybe at least limited capacity is a little bit more safe and acceptable than it was last fall, when it was a little bit more of an uncertainty. I am not an epidemiologist. I don't know. I'm just a sports talking guy here on YouTube.com and Spreaker.com. But it does feel like maybe people are a little bit more willing to take a little bit of a risk. And there's just a balancing act. We talked earlier about the guys, the thousands of kids who didn't get a chance to go to camps last summer. You would certainly hope that the 2022 kids and 2023 kids have the opportunity to go to some kind of an Ohio State football camp this summer, and some kind of a Clemson football camp, or Alabama football camp, or Western Michigan football camp, whatever, to get an opportunity to earn a scholarship. That's a big deal for these guys. That's potentially a life-changing thing for some of these guys. And I feel like we've probably established that you can be outside, and maybe you take some additional spacing precautions and that kind of stuff. But if everyone gets tested before they come, it seems like you could probably host one of those outside at some point this summer, and it would probably be okay, and it would probably be beneficial for all those players.
It is interesting that you have tied the reinstatement of official visits to a presidential election.
I'm pretty sure I didn't say any of those words. I am actually quite certain I didn't say any of those words, sir.
How funny official visits are now allowed again, sir. Going back to the summer when Gene Smith was saying, maybe 22,000, maybe 50,000. I wonder if the influx of knowledge that we now have would allow them to go back to that 22,000 number, somewhere in that range. And maybe even for the spring. I'm assuming much larger crowds in the fall, hopefully, but we will see. So that's one guy, JT Tuimoloau, who is impacted by this. I don't know that the next guy we're going to talk about, Rajon Davis, is going to be too impacted by this because he is the top 50-ish linebacker out of California, just visited Ohio State with his family, or I should say the Ohio State campus with his family last weekend, is choosing between USC and Ohio State. Basically was an LSU commit, decommitted from there. So that is, I don't know that he would need necessarily at this point to delay things. I'm sure he's been to USC many, many times, and now he finally got a chance to see Ohio State. Seemed to really enjoy it. I do like the idea that this is just all a ruse to build suspense for when he chooses USC, because this is just something that families do. You know what? Let's go toy with Ohio State fans on Twitter. Well, what do we have to do? Well, here it's very simple. We're going to get the family. We're going to buy some plane tickets. We're going to go to the airport. We're going to fly across the country to Ohio in January and just, drive around, shoot some video, take some pictures of campus, and then we'll fly back home. And the entire time we can laugh when we're not on camera about how we are just screwing with people on the internet, and it'll be a great time. And so, Tom, I just hope that's not what's going on.
I have a sense that there may have been other motivations at work there.
The election?
Thank you. We were all thinking it. Thank you. Yeah, there have been people who have suggested that, he may have been leaning towards Ohio State, but his parents, without having visited Ohio State, weren't super comfortable with the idea of him flying all the way across the country to go to college when he's, a California kid, and USC was kind of right at home. And you have seen that work in Ohio State's favor, where they go, they see the campus, they're sold. You have seen that work not in Ohio State's favor. I mean, Bijan Robinson, that was a distance thing. With his family, they weren't thrilled with him going to Ohio State, so then he ended up in Texas. That can go a couple different ways, but it's a decision. I mean, this is like a legitimate decision. I think the vibes coming out of that visit from the end of the weekend, when I had Mark Givler on the morning show for Monday, sounded like Ohio State was feeling more confident than they had been before, that they were in a decent spot and they had shown him what they were hoping to show him. And then the question is always, okay, wait 4 days, let the afterglow of the visit die down a little bit, because you had that with Emeka Egbuka. He went to Oklahoma right before he was going to be signing, and they, I think people came away from that visit thinking, oh man, he's going to Oklahoma. And Mark at that time said, give it a few days, let the afterglow die down, and then see where it is. And now Emeka Egbuka is enrolled at Ohio State, not Oklahoma. So there's still a little bit of a question. It's probably something we're going to find out in the next few days. I mean, we're 6 days from signing day right now, so you're going to find out in the next 6 days, but you might find out a little before then even, or at least sort of have a better indication which direction he's leaning at that point. So, yeah, I mean, this is one of these, credit to Al Washington, because there are a million reasons for him to not go to Ohio State, not fly halfway across the country to a place he's, hasn't, his parents have never seen. He hadn't been for, more a year or something. That is an Al Washington, for Al Washington to have Ohio State in the spot that they are right now is a tribute to just how hard he's worked, how strong a relationship he's built with him. And, wherever Davis ends up going, Washington deserves a lot of credit for that.
And this is a recruitment that Bill Green on our Ask the Insiders board has been saying for many months, just keep an eye on it. Mm-hmm. And this is while Davis was still an LSU Tiger, just saying, hey, just keep this one in the back of your memory. And here we are. And maybe the day after they got back, or it was Monday or Tuesday. Maybe his dad, Rajon Davis's dad, said, maybe we'll see you back here in a week or something. We're gonna come back to Columbus for another visit. And the family seemed to enjoy it as well. And I think that was the key for Davis, maybe also the key for Ohio State. And we'll find out maybe here in the next week where that's going to go. So there is room for those two. I think we've convinced the listeners and the viewers of that math. There is room for those two. It's not like they would have to tell Davis no, or JT, like, look, your spot was taken by Rajon Davis. And so good luck at, wherever you want to go. Good luck in Alabama. Sorry, just couldn't work out. They're not going to do that. So there is room for both those guys. Tom, I also have a sneaking suspicion there is room for some transfers. So let's run through a few of these names. We already talked about Tate Martel. We'll probably that marriage probably won't happen again. It was a fun marriage while it lasted, but that is probably something that won't happen again. So let's focus on really. I think I've got three other guys listed, but mainly just probably two are the better opportunity, and maybe only one is the real opportunity with Eli Ricks, the LSU cornerback, freshman this past year, freshman All-American, a couple of pick sixes, I believe, and I think maybe 4 interceptions on the season. Very talented guy, a 5-star signee. And this has been one of my favorite things ever on the Ask the Insiders board. I think it was on Monday, Alex had some information on Ricks, just a little Monday information dump on this is what I'm hearing about Eli Ricks. And then like Tuesday, I think Bill had something more, and then Alex had something more, and then Wednesday Bill had something more. Now it's Thursday. I'm waiting for the latest update on Eli Ricks to hit, and maybe it will after we're done recording. But this has been a fun one to follow, where there is so much information coming from the LSU side that think that he's probably not coming back to LSU. But as I've told other people, players get talked out of transferring in college football and college sports every single day. Players want to transfer every single day, and coaches or family members will talk them out of it. And Ricks is tied to LSU a lot more than your regular college kid, because his family moved from California to Baton Rouge. So that's even another aspect that weighs in on this one.
Yeah, and you're uprooting. They uprooted their lives once to move, because this was the place he was sold on. Obviously, the freshman year didn't go the way he expected, or the way anyone down there hoped. But can he sell them on the fact that no, this is so irreversibly broken that I will never be happy here. I need to go somewhere else. I mean, Ohio State was was another school in his recruitment that was a pretty serious candidate coming out of high school. So this is not just doing something on a whim. This is something that you can look at Ohio State and feel like that might be a better place for you than LSU right now, and a lot more stability in the program and all of that. And so it's important to note he is not actually in the transfer portal yet. That is a very important point we need to raise here. It is entirely possible he stays at LSU. The smoke coming from LSU, and this is one of the benefits of being on that Ask the Insiders board, is this is not just like one guy who's talking to one guy, and this is what my one guy is telling me. This is when we say a team of insiders, this is what we're talking about. You've got guys who are connected to LSU. You've got guys who are connected to Ohio State. You can hear things from a couple different sides of the thing, and what are people hearing? What is things? The people who are in the building with him at LSU. What are they seeing? What are they hearing? There has been a lot of conversations about smoke this week, and there's a lot of smoke, and there is no fire yet, but there's a lot of smoke, and this is someone who obviously would be, probably the most impactful possible addition for Ohio State in terms of a transfer this offseason, because you've got a freshman All-American at the position of what is clearly the biggest need for Ohio State, someone who comes in and is quite possibly immediately the best cornerback on the roster. Ohio State Sevyn Banks is a very, very good corner, and I think is probably set up to be a potential first-round NFL pick in another year. Cam Brown is a little bit. I mean, I think I was fairly high on Cam Brown coming into last year, and then you have an Achilles injury. There's a little bit of uncertainty there with the recovery that you don't quite know what you have with him yet, and they'll probably see. Hopefully he's able to start getting back on the field a little bit this spring, at least in just kind of jogging and that kind of stuff. But, he's not going to be full go until maybe next, this summer, this fall. That's a concern. And if they can get someone like Eli Ricks, that completely changes the ceiling. It allows them to run the defense they want to run probably more efficiently, more effectively. It also completely changes the ceiling for this team. That solves probably your biggest issue and makes you a legitimate national championship contender once again next year. That doesn't mean there's not an internal solution somewhere else, but it immediately provides an answer. There may be other guys on this roster who do the same thing, but we don't know about them yet. If Eli Ricks comes in, that really kind of answers one of the big questions.
Now, here's where I get into my I'm going to play the part of a 66-year-old gruff sports writer. I've watched highlights of Eli Ricks, and I've watched him play. He's a very boisterous and cocky guy. I think some of that you need at that position. But when I watch him return a pick six against Kyle Trask and hold up before he gets to the end zone so that Trask can catch up to him so that he can score in his face, or when I watch him doing a lot of trash talking or showboating, Tom, we know that Ryan Day has said it's about culture fit, and that's in recruiting, that's in coaching, that's in the transfer portal. Can Eli Ricks fit the Ohio State culture if he's going to be showboating on all of these touchdowns?
Now, I hear the underlying concern about the presidential election in your question there. No, kidding. Sorry. I'm trying to delete. Which one is the delete button, in the words of a legendary Ohio State superfan? Which one is the delete button? He's someone who I guess I don't clutch my pearls and fall over on my fainting couch when I see a cornerback talking trash and being a little flashy. That is something that is a little bit. It's a common trait among those who play corner.
David Arnett would never do it.
I was gonna say Ohio State just had someone who really liked to do that a couple years ago. Who Damon Arnett as a player matured quite a bit during his career, but even at the end, when we were on here talking about how he's matured so much and he's still, when he broke up a pass, he would let you know that he broke up a pass. So, I am. This is probably a function of me not being 66 years old like you apparently are, but I find it difficult to flop down on my fainting couch just because of some trash talk and a little bit of swagger, as the kids say.
That's a dirty word to me. I don't like that. Let's go to somebody who is in the transfer portal, and that's former Tennessee linebacker Henrique, who is really, really good. Also a freshman All-American in 2019, was a sophomore this past season, played middle linebacker for the Volunteers. He, I don't know, there hasn't been nearly as much smoke as Ricks. I don't know that there's been any smoke since he entered, and it's just a position where Buckeye fans are like, ooh, there's a linebacker out there. Ohio State just lost their top 4 linebackers. Maybe this is a guy that can just plug and play, and he is a guy that could just plug and play. But does Ohio State like their linebackers enough that this isn't necessarily something they would explore? But also, he is so good, I think you have to explore it because you're always looking to upgrade. If he's contacting Ohio State and Ohio State doesn't listen, I think they'd be crazy. But there's really no previous connection that I know of between Ohio State and To'o. Now, yes, he by wanting to get out of Tennessee, that makes him an intelligent person. So Ohio State would be a good option, frankly. But there are Ohio State has a lot of linebackers, nobody proven, and so is this a Jonah Jackson type of situation where he would come in and immediately become a leader, even though there are three senior linebackers, rising senior linebackers who would be older than him, and would that create some tension, some issues there? And that's where it depends on him. The Ohio State culture is strong, and you know, I that Jonah Jackson transfer and marriage was so perfect, and it could have been horrendous. It could have upset everything on the offensive line. He came in, was the perfect fit, the perfect fit for the room, for the actual line, and just his whole attitude. Being at Rutgers, and you finally get to Ohio State, and you're like, wow, now I have a chance to win. Maybe there's some of that if you got a guy coming from Tennessee, but this is also a linebacker room where you've got three guys who have been waiting their turn, and I don't think Ohio State is worried about upsetting anybody because they want the best guys to play. But it's just something to think about in this when we discuss Henry To'oTo'o.
Yeah, and he's, in addition to all of that, he's also a West Coast guy who Ohio State. I mean, if you look on his recruiting profile page on 247, Ohio State is literally not listed. He's not, that was not someone that he was looking at a high school. It's not a program that he has this existing relationship with where he's seen the campus and all that kind of stuff. It's just, there's I think there's a lot of reasons to think like, yeah, it would be great to add him. Anytime you can bring in a freshman All-American and have a couple of years with him. He actually was a 2019, so he theoretically could turn pro after next year. But, if you bring him in, you have potentially a multi-year starter, potentially. But, and it's just so much less of a position of need than corner that I think that's a lot, without an existing relationship, we'll talk about someone else in a minute who has a personal relationship and a high school teammate relationship with someone who is on Ohio State's team right now. But, without the existing relationship, I think this is a little bit more of a long shot.
Yeah, I would agree. And that takes us to the next guy who we've talked about before, former USC linebacker, Palaie Naoteote, who is now in the portal, who for the longest time looked like he was going to be an Ohio State Buckeye out of high school, played at Bishop Gorman with Haskell Garrett and Tate Martel, was a year behind them, if I recall. And I remember watching him as a junior in high school. He looked like Ryan Shazier. The dude was incredible in the backfield constantly. Since that time, since he got to USC, has dealt with injuries, and it's certainly not the same player he was back then. Maybe a step slower and things of that nature. So I think if you had a choice between the two, you're taking Henry To'oTo'o. I don't know that there is a choice between the two, and maybe Naoteote maybe doesn't want to come all this way. And I don't know how open Ohio State would even be to it, Yeah,
he's someone who, first of all, when I say he has a personal relationship, he's cousins with Haskell Garrett in addition to being a teammate of Haskell Garrett in high school. So, there is a connection there. He obviously looked at Ohio State that I think, seriously considered Ohio State. He is, I think he would be on the nice to have as another option kind of list. I don't know. Is he coming across the country from USC to be at Ohio State and maybe be a role player next year if he's healthy? If you're not sure about how healthy you are you going to go all the way across the country and, maybe you're not healthy enough to play and then you're just, thousands of miles from home and are you happy there? I mean, there's a lot of considerations there. And, again, if Ohio State has the spot for him, this seems like like the baseball team, giving someone a spring training invitation and, the guy who was an ace pitcher a couple of years ago, well, bring him to spring training, see what you got. If it's just a scholarship for a year and that doesn't, you're not bumping up against that scholarship limit, there's not a tremendous amount of downside there. But, how willing is he going to be able to do that? Because that's asking a lot. We've talked a lot about the sacrifices that these guys have had to make the last year. If you're moving across the country, that's a significant sacrifice. That's you're uprooting your life, and yeah, you've got someone you know in that program and that you're a little bit familiar with the program, but that's asking a lot. There probably is an easier path to the field for him if he goes to Utah or Cal or somewhere like that that's a lot closer to home. But I mean, that's if he I think if he called, they would probably answer and be willing to give it a shot.
And they could show him what they've done with Justin Hilliard in terms of not just here's a guy with injury history, but also here's our fourth linebacker and here's how much he played.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, maybe they won't be playing as much 4-4 next year or 4 linebackers next year based on their secondary situation, but they can show him that if there's something, if they believe he can still play, and there's options there. Anybody else that has hit the portal, Tom, that has caught your attention? I don't think really when I see we've got a running transfer portal thread on the Ask the Insiders board, and I check it every now and again. I add to it every now and again, and there's not a lot of ooh. I think we've covered all of the oohs.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty good possibility they're going to want to bring in a quarterback. I have not oohed over any quarterbacks that I have seen. You're not bringing in Justin Fields this year. Like that's not the quarterback you bring. You're bringing in
Dylan
Chris
McCaffrey.
Sorry, boy, wouldn't that be a fun subplot? Yeah, you got multiple McCaffreys in the portal. You could bring one of them in. You're bringing in a Chris Chuganoff, a Gunnar Hoke, a veteran guy who is looking for an opportunity to potentially be on the roster, get your grad degree if you're if it's a grad transfer kind of thing, be a fourth scholarship guy, because if you're coming in, odds are whoever is coming in is probably not going to start, because if you start someone over CJ Stroud and Jack Miller and Kyle McCord, you are asking for one or more than one of those guys to transfer out. So odds are it's going to be, and the talent level there is pretty darn good. You probably have multiple guys who could start this year and do just fine in that group. So they don't need someone to come in. They would really like, this is something Ryan Day's talked about in the past. They would really like to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks at all times, just for depth purposes, because go back to last year, like you saw the importance of depth, and you have seen Ohio State football teams in the past where they've gotten down to the third string quarterback, or their second string, sometimes third string quarterback. You don't want that to be the last scholarship guy on your roster. If Ohio State had played Michigan last year, Michigan was down potentially to Dan Villari, who is a true freshman, 2-star guy who, would have been quite possibly one of the least qualified quarterbacks to ever play in Ohio Stadium. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to have 3 guys who you're really comfortable with, and a fourth guy who's like, well, he's okay. Like the difference between a Chris Chuganoff and a Dan Villari is enormous. A Gunnar Hoke and Dan Villari is enormous, just in terms of experience, reps. You want another guy in there who you're probably not winning a national championship with him, but it's also not just like, oh no, this is just a complete fire drill now. Like you have to have a baseline of competence in that fourth scholarship guy. And I think Ohio State's going to find someone, but I don't think I don't think that name is in the portal yet.
Don't you feel a little ripped off though that we didn't get to see Dan Villari?
That would have been, just in terms of a spectacle. Like,
yes,
we saw a lot of things last year that we had never seen before. I feel like that would have been another one of those things where it's just like, I don't know how to process what is happening in front of my eyes right now. We saw some stuff last year. We were one of 400 people or whatever in the building for the Indiana game, and games getting canceled on the day before the game, and Big Ten championship with the Indianapolis Colts field and a few hundred people in the stand. That was a year full of wow, I didn't think I'd ever see this kind of thing. But man, that would have been a spectacle. Now, would they have given up 350 yards passing? I don't know. I'm not able to tell you that they wouldn't have given up 350 yards passing, but it would have been. I go back to like the Stephen Threet year with Michigan in 2000. Nick Sheridan, Stephen Threet in 2008. Like, it might have been the poor man Stephen Threet at that point, and that's not, again. I'm going to have the same disclaimer as we had with the Tate Martel conversation. We're not trying to make fun of Dan Villari. This is a true freshman who is an emergency last minute signing when the guy that Michigan was trying to sign had a heart condition, had to medically retire. This is someone who, he was I think going to Fordham at some point and flipped from Fordham to Michigan very late, and then was a true freshman who had all the same crap that everyone else was dealing with last year, with limited practice, limited reps. Someone who, if everything pans out great, 3 years from now you could have a Chris Chugginoff. Like that is not a fair position to put someone in. It just would have been like complete. I mean, I keep coming back to the word spectacle. Like it would have been something we'd never seen before.
It's something where, back in the 50s, you would have had to pay like a nickel to go see it inside of a tent.
And instead, Michigan did the old P.T. Barnum, see the spectacular egress, and they found the egress for the game.
So, I just feel like, it would have been nice. It was a rough year. It would have been nice just to see what that kind of thing looks like. The football program version of that, Tom, let's close the show with the topic we closed, I think, the last show with, or the previous show with, Tennessee football. The Volunteers have found their new coach. The amazing thing, they hired Danny White, the UCF AD. They pay a search firm like $100,000, and then they just end up hiring Josh Heupel, who is Danny White's head coach at UCF. So I wonder, was Danny White the search firm, or like what a stupid waste of money to, you can have this national search and it turns out, the best guy that we've come back with is Josh Heupel. It reminds me of, like, say you're a guy or two guys who have a podcast and rarely do you prepare for it. And then you're like, you know what, for $100,000, I'll prepare. And then you still don't prepare, but you pocket the money and then you just talk about what Ryan Day talked about that day.
I was going to say, I have not seen my $50,000 for that. We have done show prep at some point, and I have yet to see my half of that money. So we're going to have a conversation after we hit stop. But Heupel's an interesting choice. And I think Danny White said he was the only person they offered the job to, which is like, that's probably technically correct. Right. If you're in the most literal sense of the word, yes, he was the only person they offered the job to. However, I'm going to guess that search firm offered up maybe a few other names, and those names were probably spoken to and respectfully declined to take the position with the organization that is probably about to get nuked by the NCAA because they're going to self-report a bunch of level 1 and level 2 violations, which they are reporting because they don't want to pay the buyout for the previous coach. So you're walking into a situation where there's not a lot of certainty in terms of what you're actually walking into. Like, how many scholarship restrictions you're going to have? Are you going to get a bowl ban? Like, you don't know. That's not a real comfortable spot to be walking into. And then to be doing that at a place where the previous guy, they're trying to not give him his buyout because they're saying he cheated. So are you walking into a place where you're going to be set up to fail, and also you're not going to get your buyout because they have a history of trying not to give you your buyout? I mean, that is not setting, that is not the most attractive job. And that's even before you get to the fact that the expectations versus results at Tennessee are about as out of whack as anywhere in the country. Like, I mean, the expectations there are, this is one of the top 15 jobs in the country. And the results are like, you're going to get murdered by Alabama and Georgia and Florida every year. So you basically start with 3 losses every season. And if everything else goes perfectly, you're playing in the Outback Bowl. That's about but you're doing it with the expectations of this team should be in the New Year's Six every year, or at least every other year. And, also all the other stuff we just talked about. So I can understand. I mean, you saw names bandied about, PJ Fleck and James Franklin. It's like, what are they offering those guys? They're already making money at a Power 5 position. So are you going to, James Franklin's $6-7 million a year. Are you going to beat that by so much that it's worth it for James Franklin to leave Penn State? I don't think it is. And Lane Kiffin, I mean, there's a history there, as you may be aware. And also, Ole Miss is, I mean, he walked into a situation with scholarship issues at Ole Miss because of NCAA violations, but they're already like partway through it. He knew what he was walking into, and they're already partway through it. Now you'd be starting over at a place where you don't even know what you're walking into. And someone pointed this out. I forget where I read this, but when Kiffin went to USC, when he went from Tennessee to USC, after he showed up at USC, that's when the NCAA nuked them for, with their scholarship. So he's already done this before. He's already seen what that looks like. There's no freaking way he's doing that again, especially at Tennessee. And then that would be involved Tennessee being like, oh yeah, no, yeah, come back. I'm sure you won't leave us again. I'm sure it will be fine. So yeah, that was just, I think that is, as I said, maybe one of the jobs that has the biggest disconnect between what its fan base thinks it is and what it actually is.
Well, you mentioned it's a top 15 job, or people are saying that. Is that in the SEC? Because I don't know if it's, I mean, maybe.
Yeah. And people are looking at Josh Heupel's record, and, I'm just going to read you his records at UCF, and you tell me what direction this trend is going. And there are some asterisks on here, but 12-1, and then 10-3, and then 6-4. And it's like, okay, like, right. I mean, you get a little bit of a pass for last year. They had a lot of opt-outs. Okay. The year before that, I think a couple of those losses were pretty close losses. So it's like, okay, you're not too far off, but it's like you're kind of making excuses, and maybe they're legitimate to a certain degree, but you're not, that nothing about that is like, this is definitely a home run hire. It's like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Danny White knows him, so I get, he knows what he's signing up for, but I do wonder how much of this is Josh Heupel was willing to take this because he knows the AD. He has because of that, their existing relationship, he's reasonably confident he's not going to get completely hosed, because I think there are other people, if PJ Fleck was going to jump and take this job, first of all, I'm not convinced Tennessee's a substantially better job than Minnesota at this point. But even if it was just like a million, millions and millions of extra dollars, like, okay, how confident are you that if things don't go well, and things are probably not going to go well for a while because of the looming NCAA stuff, how confident are you that they're not going to try and pull the same thing they pulled on Jeremy Pruitt? And the answer is, I don't know that you can be that confident.
Well, and that's why you had to go outside the SEC, because when you're offering the job to other SEC coaches and they're like, you mean you're going to like try to withhold money from me for cheating? That's not what we do here. That's like,
I thought you wanted to win.
Exactly. I mean, that's like saying, looking at your contract and being like, I don't get any vacation days. This is outrageous. How am I even supposed to operate? But I do think there is, if you're Danny White and Josh Heupel has to be thinking, because nowadays I think you can expect at most 3 years before you get fired, unless you're just really terrible. With this kind of job and this kind of familiarity with the AD, you're thinking, well, do I get an extra 2 years on that? And maybe, but if there's no improvement after 3 years, like that extra 2 years that you may think you're getting from it, I don't even know what the deal is, but maybe you think you'll get some leniency, and you might for the first couple of years, but by year 3, you're established. This is your team, and yeah, maybe you were dealt a bad hand, but if you're not getting better and showing improvement, if you're 4-8 at year 3, where's the justification for year 4? If you've been 3-9, 4-8, 4-8, at some point, even with the hand you're dealt, it needs to be getting better. And if I don't think good friends can just, the pressure is too great at Tennessee, because as you said, people think they should be winning more. They view themselves as Georgia, as Florida, and that's where they should be. And it was great in the 90s when they were, but it hasn't been that way for a very long time.
Yeah, and I just was pulling up the Tennessee coaching history. There have been 4 guys who have been head coach since Phil Fulmer. And would you like to guess how many of them got a 5th year? The answer is 0. 0. Lane Kiffin had 1. Derek Dooley had 3. He was replaced by interim Jim Chaney. Butch Jones got 4. And he was replaced by interim Brady Hoke, which is, if you saw me giggling, that's what I was laughing about. Interim Brady Hoke, 0-2. Yes. Jeremy Pruitt got 3, and then that's it. So, and I mean, Butch Davis, I'm sorry, but Jones, he got them to 9-4 in back-to-back years. That was tied for second in the East, and they went to the Outback Bowl and the Music City Bowl. That's it. That is the peak of Tennessee football in the last 15 years. They finished 23rd and 24th in the polls. That's it. And that's as good as it's gotten. So, yeah, it is. I don't know. And I should say he did not get 5 full seasons. He got four seasons and then a little bit because they had a spectacular season where they started, I believe they started 4-0 in non-conference. And then, they won all 4 non-conference games and then went 0-6 in the SEC. And then he got fired. And then Brady Hoke led them to 2 stirring SEC losses to wrap up the year, including a 42-24 loss at home against Vanderbilt. Yowza. That is some Brady Hoke stuff right there.
A very Hokian volunteer season. Tom, you got anything else before we head out of here? I think we've covered it all.
I think we've covered everything we need to cover this week. And next week, National Signing Day on Wednesday. That's going to be, this is obviously not the quite the spectacle it used to be with early signing day taking a lot of the shine off there. But the Rajon Davis story is going to be something that's definitely worth watching between now and then. JT Tuimoloau obviously not signing next Wednesday. That's one that's sort of worth continuing to watch. And then we may have transfer portal drama to discuss at that point as well. And plus, they have Ohio State will have started their winter workouts as well. So lots of fun stuff to talk about next week. So it should be, we keep saying this, but there really is no off season right now. Maybe in May there's a little bit of an off season, but right now it's college football off season. It's is it? Because it doesn't feel like it.
And hopefully we will get to talk to Ryan Day on Wednesday and have more for you guys, maybe for the Thursday show, or who knows if we'll do a Wednesday show. I don't know. We plan a day in advance at most at the show.
We live our podcast a quarter mile at a time. That's what we do. There's also, we should mention this. There's also a basketball season going on. We'll maybe talk a little basketball next week. That's I think, are you covering the basketball game on Sunday? I'm covering the basketball game on Sunday.
Yeah. Michigan State. Yes.
Michigan State. Yes. So we'll, maybe we'll talk a little basketball. We could do a basketball podcast, basketball pregame on Sunday. The look of enthusiasm on your face suggests that we shan't, but that's all right. Maybe we'll do a morning show episode for Monday next week. Do a basketball episode.
No, and it is man, the Wednesday night one was a rough one, but when you win ugly,
yeah,
that's winning ugly is also the mark of a good team, and I think Ohio State is good enough to beat anybody. And then they are also able to lose to Penn State or Purdue. And as Chris Holtman said all week, Penn State is he believes they're an NCAA tournament team. And that was a rough one. But they found a way, came back from 8 down in the second half when they could have just quit and given up, and they didn't. And again, that's the mark of a good team, not necessarily a bad team.
Well, as I said, it is a an ugly win beats that being a bad loss, showing up in your bad losses chiron on Selection Sunday when they're putting your tournament resume up. The fewer games you have in that bad losses column, the better. And that is not going to show up as a quadrant 1 win for Ohio State on that day, but it's also not going to show up as a bad loss. So therefore that's fine. There's a little bit of survive in advance going on in the Big Ten this year with as deep as the conference is. So yeah, that's not one that's going to get shown on Big Ten Network on the Ohio State Basketball Classics anytime soon, but that's fine. They, if you win, you win. That's fine.
Yeah, that win just goes into the pile of W's, and it doesn't stick out as just one gigantic neon L.
But yeah, it's like you don't remember all the games where Ohio State beat Mississippi Valley State or Jackson State or Northern Illinois in one of those like preseason games in November or December of a normal year. But man, oh man, if they lost one of those games, like you would remember it. Like I remember there was a year when they lost to Findlay or something in one of those exhibition games at the beginning of the year. I don't remember a thing from any of the other ones, but I remember the year they lost. Like the Penn State game, 3 weeks from now, it'll be like, did they play? I don't remember that game at all, but they won, so whatever. So yeah, that it was not pretty. It was not anything you ever need to think about again. So congratulations. You don't ever need to think about that basketball game ever again.
2 wins with Dwayne Washington just shooting horrifically, but doing other things to help the team out, as Holtman said on Wednesday night. And I think it was 6 assists in each game, so that is a positive. That will do it for us. Tom, who you got coming up on the morning scoop tomorrow?
Let's talk about who we had on the morning scoop on Thursday. That was Alex Gleitman. At this point, it's like there's so much stuff going on. Normally, we would maybe record just the morning scoop right now after we're done with this. There's a lot of stuff going on. I don't want to record something right now because it feels like something, someone's going to pop in the transfer portal. Someone will end up announce a transfer. You may get a little bit more direction on Race John Davis, something like that. So we're going to play it by ear today. See what happens. I have a list of guests on my computer of nothing happened today. Here's someone I should have on to talk about something. So
where am I on that list?
Middle-ish.
Wow, dang. You get one person saying I'm on your show too much, and then you're like, I'm no longer allowed on it.
I'm just trying to give you a break, but we'll have plenty to.
I can see your eyes scanning the list. You couldn't find me, and then you're like middle.
You're Nathan Johnson. You're someone. I'm someone. I'm on Tom's list. Yes, that's it, buddy. You just made the list. Yeah, it should be. Something will happen on Thursday, and then we'll talk about it Friday morning. Is my guess.
Yeah, that is winter in Ohio. So again, check out BuckeyeScoop.com if you're not yet a member. I feel like you're doing it to spite us. Like we've been telling you guys for so long, and then stuff going on is fun. Bill Green is having his weekly Thursday chat right now. That'll go on all day, and it's always a good read. So if you're not yet a member, try it out. 1 month is all it takes, and then you'll realize that it's an easy investment, and you will enjoy it. So thank you all for listening, and have a good weekend. We'll talk to you guys next week.